This was the standard class 4, but in tender form, and the idea behind the tender was obviously it could carry more fuel and also more water, and that would increase the range. Hi there, I'm Jenny Kirk and welcome along to another video here on my YouTube channel. And today we're going to have a box opening and review, and I've got a locomotive for you, something a little bit special. So without further ado, let's take a closer look. Well, what I've got here for you today is the standard class 4MT 460, and this is a Bachmann super detailed model from the branch line range. It's been in that range a little while now, and they've put out quite a few different versions. And don't let the extreme shelf wear on this box fool you. It was sourced second hand through a very good friend of mine through the Biggest Little Railway project as a Derry. Big thanks to Derry. Thanks very much for sourcing this for me. It's a type of locomotive that I'd kind of had an eye on for quite a while, but only just now been able to get one thanks to good work from Derry. So we can see there that we've got the catalogue number 31-116, and this is the locomotive in a lined green livery, and it's actually a model of one of the examples that were preserved. There's 6 of these did survive into preservation, and this is a model of one of the preserved ones. And it's something that I probably need to point out is that this is a model of it as preserved. That means that this is suitable for modern image layouts, but there's probably a few detail differences that would mean that for the absolute aficionado, it's not entirely strictly suitable for the BR period. Now, these locomotives had some quite short working lives. They were part of the standards program to build a standard class of locomotives, so several different ones. This was the standard class 4, but in tender form, and the idea behind the tender was obviously it could carry more fuel and also more water, and that would increase the range. They were a bit of an ugly duckling, but they were pretty successful, apart from on the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway, where they were plagued with poor steaming, but later modifications fixed that, and they put in Stirling service across the London Midland region, the Eastern region and the Southern region. I don't believe that they particularly found their way to Scotland, but I've only had a quick look through the history of these. Designed by Robert Riddles at Brighton, with input from other members of the BR design teams at Swindon, at Derby and Darlington as well, I believe, but principally designed at Brighton. Some of the class were built at Brighton, but there was also a good number built in other locations, including Swindon and Horwich Locomotive Works. Now, this particular example, I believe, was built at Horwich, because one thing I did notice when looking through all of the details about the surviving members of the class, they're all Horwich-built examples. One of the interesting things that we found is that whilst the website I was looking at says that all of the surviving preserved examples were built at Horwich Locomotive Works, the works plate that's tampo printed onto this particular example says Swindon, so I'm actually more inclined to think that Bachmann got it right rather than the website I was looking at, so it's just something to bear in mind. Now, very quickly show you this. This is a little detail bag. This is pretty standard now that we get these with locomotives from any manufacturer now, and this is user-fitted detail. And looking in there, we've got look to be drain cock pipes. We've got a front coupling there. We've got some buffer beam pipe work, which is probably something that if you're going to remove things like the front coupling, then yes, a lot of this is easy enough to put on. But if you're going to keep that front slimline tension lock coupling, a lot of this detail really is going to just stay in the bag. So I'm just going to have a quick closer look. We've got some steps as well, and I think those steps go at the front. In fact, yeah, I'm pretty certain those steps go right at the front. But again, on train set curves, you're going to have a problem if you fit these, because as this locomotive goes round the more tight curves that we're used to on our home layouts, you're going to find that these bogie wheels swing out a little bit too far. So you may find it's probably best not to add those unless you've got either an end-to-end layout with prototypical curves, or it's going to live in a display cabinet. For me, this is going to run. I have tested it, it does work, but a little note here, because of the adverse weather conditions that we've been having, it's actually really unpleasant out in the shed. It's really, really cold, and I'm still struggling a lot with a bad knee, so it's very difficult for me to get in and out. So I would have run this, would have filmed some of this running, but it just, unfortunately, I'm really sorry, it hasn't been practical. It will come in a future running video, so you will get to see this running in time, but for the moment we're going to just focus on the model as we see it here. Now it comes with, I think this is a BR1B standard tender, and this was something that BR had done. Rather than having lots and lots of mixed and matched oldie hand-me-down cast-offs from other locomotive classes, they had the BR1A, BR1B, BR1C tenders, all of these, and they were just standard interchangeable between all the different standard classes. There's a lot of influences from American type locomotives here. So we've got this very high running plate and the cylinders set back from the front here, and then the dropped front. And it's something I've seen mentioned that, you know, they're a little bit of an ugly duckling, but they did gather something of a following, particularly as the 6 members survived into preservation. They've been sterling workhorses. I think one of them has never steamed in preservation, but the others have, and performed pretty well. And as I alluded to before, they had actually a very, very short working life. It's one of the things that, unfortunately, British Rail, they set about, oh, well, we'll build more steam locomotives to replace these old Victorian, worn-out locomotives that the war has run down, and we'll build these standards. It's a good idea, except they then came along, change of plan. It's like, oh no, with the 1955 modernisation policy, we shall sweep away all of these steam locomotives. So it was actually a lot of money wasted on building these, what were actually quite expensive capital items for a comparatively short working period. I mean, you bear in mind that some of the Victorian locomotives lasted for anywhere up to 60 years, and yet these were all gone within 11, 12 years. But that's by the by. Now, running characteristics of this, it was, in the brief test that I was able to do with it, very, very smooth runner. This particular example, it's got an 8-pin DCC socket, and it has been fitted with a chip, but it's been set up so it will also run on DC. And it's actually something I've noticed. I've got a Fairburn tank, which I'll just interject here that the Fairburn tank is actually what a lot of the design of the nitty-gritty of this was carried over and perfected from. So it's actually got the same boiler as a Fairburn tank, except it's extended by 9 inches, but it's got the same firebox. But with a DCC chip in, I tend to find they actually do run, when set up properly, an awful lot smoother. So that's something for people like me who don't do DCC. It can be advantageous to get these, especially second hand, with a DCC chip in. It's an old enough model that it doesn't have any kind of tender pickups. Newer models, not of this type, but of other locomotive types that Bachmann have introduced more recently, tend to have a plug and wire connection to the tender and tender pickups. Now that does improve running, but it does come at the cost that they can become quite unwieldy, and it's very easy to damage the tender plug. So I actually quite like, you know, going a little bit more old school, going a bit more old fashioned, and having a tender that you can actually just take off like that. So let's have a look at the tender first. We've got a lovely finish on this, and it's something that Bachmann have been very, very good at. This very subtle rivet detail that we've got on there of the manner of the construction of the tender. It actually comes across really well, and this lined green livery picks it out to a T. So really pleased with the finish on that. We've got the later BR logo, finely tempo printed. Lining again, fine tempo printing. There's no smudging, and it looks to be exactly where it should be. Over the years, I've grown used to seeing a lot of locomotives from a number of different manufacturers where the lining is a little bit skew with. But the tempo printing quality from the likes of Bachmann, I've never seen that. They really are spot on with these. We've also got the yellow Timken bearing covers there on the axles, nicely picked out with the yellow, and the red line is actually ever so sharp, ever so crisp, and there's not a smudge on there. It really is nicely done, and it's something that if you were hand painting these, you'd almost never be able to replicate that to that standard. And it's just so nice to see how well these models are that we're getting from the Chinese production. On the back, again, tempo printed. We've got some works plates on there. I struggle these days with my eyesight, so I can't read them without any kind of magnification. But I've got every faith that under very close magnification, we're going to be able to read these works plates perfectly, because that's what we've pretty much come to expect from all of the major players. We've got sprung buffers on the back. That's de rigueur for locomotives, really. It's highly unusual to find a locomotive these days without sprung buffers. The coupling, well, that's in a pretty standard NEM pocket there. The slim line, tension lock, but quite easy to swap out for KDs or anything else that you might want to. We've also got, let's have a look, the coal load that's in there. I'm just seeing whether there's any hint that that comes out. That's difficult to tell. I'm going to say that coal load is just moulded in there. It isn't a removable piece like we've come to see from some of the newer releases, and that can be a bit of a detraction because you know, you're stuck with a fully fueled locomotive regardless of how you want to run your railway. There's a bit of dust on this. As I said to you at the start of this video, it was sourced second hand, but there really are some very good bargains to be had second hand, so not to be sniffed at. And these locomotives, if they're looked after, you know, you're not losing out if you're buying second hand, you're only gaining. So it really is a good way to expand your fleet. Again, on the front, a detraction. You can see that plate there where the coal would come out and be shoveled off by the firemen into the fire of the locomotive. Again, solid moulding. That doesn't quite look right to me, but when coupled together, you're not really going to see a lot of that, so I'm going to let that slide. Separately fitted detail, we've got some handbrake levers on there. They're separately applied, nicely done, very, very slender, and it's something that you're going to have to watch out to try not to cause any damage to those. We've also got separately applied metal handrails there on the front. We've got the handrails on the back, and also this ladder for climbing up for access to the tender top as well. The detail moulded on the top, there's actually quite a few separately applied details, including, I'm going to draw your attention to this, I really like this. There's some bracing brackets, 2 of them there, and they're really nicely done. You can actually see through them. They're not a solid moulding. It could have been quite tempting for the likes of Bachmann to have made things a little bit easier, a little bit cheaper for themselves by making them a solid integral casting, but they haven't. Those are separately applied pieces, and they have to be applauded for doing that. There really isn't much else that I could even come close to faulting on this. The brake gear is applied here, and I think, judging by the size of the separate detail bag here, that has come fitted from the factory. So we're looking here at the locomotive, and there's a really good weight to this. You have to take my word for it. That it's got good holding power on the track because they've really crammed this with all the weight that they can. but they haven't compromised anything like DCC compatibility. There's an 8-pin plug in there, and in this particular instance, it has been pre-fitted by the previous owner with the DCC chip. Now, one of the things I've always found with the 4MT is that the chassis itself looks very slab-sided, and I had thought that this was a detraction for the model. You can see there you've got the, well, basically the chassis block. But when you look at photographs of the real thing, the real ones look pretty much the same. So I can't really criticise Bachmann too much for that. Although I can see down in there, whilst we've got some rivet detail between the first and second driving wheels, between the second and third, there's actually a screw in there. And it does seem to be a somewhat unfortunate position for a screw. I'm not sure what it's holding in, but I do wonder, does it really need to be on display? Although, again, it comes back to the fact that from the usual observation distance when this is running, you really won't notice. Again, on the underside, we've got, it appears to be factory fitted brake rigging, and actually that's a boon, because certainly some models, they give you these in a little packet and expect you to fit them yourself, and it's actually really difficult, so that saves a lot of aggro. We've got pickup wipers on the back of all the main driving wheels, but that does appear, without the tender pickups, to be the only source of power pickup it's got. But it's weighty enough that it doesn't really seem to handicap it. The front pony truck actually is very free moving with an awfully large range of movements, so it does seem to hold the track incredibly well. It doesn't try and lift the drivers off the track because of the weight of the locomotive, so having that really well sprung actually aids it following the track without derailing, rather than reducing any kind of grip from the locomotive. Front buffers are all sprung. We've also got front drawbar hook is fitted, but in the detail pack there is a full coupling with the 3-link on there, which I believe can be fitted in there, so it's something you can modify this with should you so choose. The fronts of these I always found looked a bit odd, the way that the running plate drops right down to the buffer beam level, but actually it gives these locomotives quite a bit of character. On those front stanchions there, we've also got, I believe it's a works plate, but again, tampo printed. And to tampo print into there, when you think about it, they've got to get right into all that detail, and there's not a hint of a smudge on that, so it really is good. The rest of the locomotive's finish, well, tampo printed, we've got a shed code, we've got the locomotive's number on the smokebox door, all nicely done. The smokebox dart is a separately fitted detail, as are some of these handrails, and I believe the hinges might be as well. There's certainly a wealth of separately applied detail on this. We've got the double chimney this particular model is fitted with, and I believe that may have been one of the modifications to improve the steaming of the class after initially lacklustre response from them when they were first delivered into capital stock. We've got a wealth of separately applied, very fine handrails on there. We've also got some pipe work, metal whistles, metal safety valves, and then on the roof, and this is something that, I'll be honest, I think it's detail for the sake of detail, we've got sliding hatches in the roof, so you can model that open or closed. And I'll be honest with you, I think the novelty will wear off very quickly once you've posed them. And certainly the locomotives I've seen, it's very rare for those hatches to be open when the locomotive's running. So not really sure about that. Other detail, well, we've got a parting line down the top of the boiler. And for me, that a little bit of a detraction, but I can live with that. The dome, though, doesn't share that parting line. It must be a separately fitted moulding in there, and it's nicely done. You can't see the join. We've got, let's have a look. I mean, the pipework on the side of the firebox there, on the outside of the boiler, is really exquisite, all separately applied. It is just lovely to see. We've also got flush glazing, really nicely done. On the cab sides, again, we've got the locomotive number, the standard class 4, and then there's a blue plate there. I can't actually read what that has on it, if anything at all, but I've got every confidence that when we view it with the macro lens, it's going to be crisp and clear, whatever it is. We've got the Walschaerts valve gear on there. It's very, very slender, but it does seem to be very robust. There's no hint of it being one of those locomotives that kind of disassembles itself after a few hours running. So I'm looking forward to actually giving this thing quite a bit of usage. We've got separate sanding pipes on there. These are made of metal, and that's always good. I don't like the plastic ones that particularly Hornby have started adding to some of their new locomotives. I think they're far too fragile, but on this they've used metal, and it's so much better for it, so that can only be a plus point. Inside the cab, well, the back head detail is fairly Spartan. It does look to be mostly moulded on, but it is massively improved by being picked out in the brass colour and the silver colour in there. Not everything is picked out, but certainly what is picked out does provide you with a backdrop which is a little bit less boring than model locomotives of old. Let's see, anything else left that I need to bring up? Tender drawbar, we've got two settings on there. We've got a close coupling setting, and then we've got the normal setting that you would run it on the track. It does look good with the close coupling setting in place, but going around anything other than prototypical curves, you're really going to not be able to do that. So unless it's going to sit in a display cabinet or you've got a rigidly straight end-to-end layout, you're going to be having it on the second setting. So overall, how would I rate this? I think it is a good model from Bachmann. It's one that's been in their range a little while now, but as this example showed, they can be picked up second-hand relatively cheaply, so it's certainly a good one to add to any locomotive fleet. Well, I hope that was informative to you. Don't forget to like this video, share it too, and also subscribe to the channel, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And we're putting up quite a few at the moment, so there's plenty of content all across the different areas that we've been producing videos on. So a little bit of something for everybody. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying take very good care of yourself. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon, and a special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson and Mark Anthony. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knob T. Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.